again, Footy and Frothies post-Easter show. Daggy, Barney, Ollie, all with you to talk about round 6 of the National Rugby League competition. Again, plenty to discuss. A lot of games didn't let us down. A couple of games maybe did, but league's chugging along pretty well, isn't it, Ollie?
Yeah, it's chugging along really well, and with a couple of results over the weekend as well, there's a gap that's getting wider. But it's seemingly 14 or 15 teams doing really well, or at least what we're expecting. And then there are a couple that are right down the bottom, but I'm sure we'll get into that.
And Barn, how do you enjoy the weekend? How's the Easter?
Just pretty quiet, mate. The wife's mother-in-law's, the mother-in-law, the wife's mother's been in hospital for the last 4 days, which is great.
Sorry to hear that.
Seems to be a bit on the mend, which must have been a bit better the last couple of days.
I'm sure she'll be back nagging you in no time, David.
Hopefully. And yeah, we're doing a bit of a fitness kick. And the knees and ankles aren't the same as they were 20 years and 30 kilos ago. So it's getting a bit painful. But no, the footy was brilliant. There was some really good football in and around on the weekend. A couple of games, I think that Suncorp's got a few issues. You guys slipping and sliding all over the place, left, right, and centre.
I generally am concerned for Magic Round. I know we've said that before, and I think 2 years ago
we said that last year. I think it was, and it turned out perfectly by the time they got the Magic Round. But it's been a consistent theme the last 2 or 3 games they've played up there. But
the call's been similar, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's been some brilliant footy and some really good individual outputs this weekend as well. Some really star performances by a few players, especially in the spine of a couple of different teams.
I know what that must be like. Anyway, we've got some not a heap of news to talk about. We've got none really, none major ones apart from injuries and the like. But I guess just a stat to throw out there: if Hammer scores this week, he'll be the only player in the history of the game to ever score 7 in 7 straight games. So there's a record for him since 1908.
He already broke a record in the game against the Cowboys. In terms of consecutively scoring in games, he's broken the record for scoring in the most consecutive games in the inaugural season for an expansion club.
Yeah, right.
It was 5. I think it was like in the 1920s or something. The record was set. It's a bit of a niche record.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I didn't know where you're going with that.
Back when everything kicked off.
But apparently he's tied the record. 6 in a row is the record, and 7 will be the new record, obviously. So that'll be a nice feather in his bow, and he's, I guess, massively overperforming. He's not alone in that team. We'll talk about that as well. Judiciary news, Francis Molo, I think, had his 3rd straight offence, a copped a 3-game whack. And we had plenty of injuries, unfortunately. The 2 big ones, 2 ACLs from the weekend. Jake Brayley, another big out for the Knights, who keep plugging along and overperforming. Adam Dewey, the other ACL there, and that's his 3rd, I believe, on that knee, which isn't ideal. So best of luck to him. Out of that same game, Naden was a suspected collarbone. Was only it wasn't quite that. It was only a tear of some description, so 2 to 4 weeks. We found out today, or Tamari Martin, 8 weeks, broken fibula. That's not ideal. Griffin Neem, 8 weeks as well. Toby Sexton on the back of returning to first grade and maybe putting his name out for some clubs that could use a 5'8" in the next rest of the season. Broken wrists, 4 to 6 weeks. And the Fox syndesmosis confirmed 8 weeks. And today we heard that Kikau tore a pec, and that's 8 to 12 weeks. So not ideal for the Bulldogs amidst everything happening there. It's been, I believe there's something in excess of 52 plus genuine first graders on the sideline at the moment, which we've seen some people come in and step in quite admirably, but not great for the game, really. A lot of them don't have a lot to do with anything bar bad luck, but unfortunate for all involved there. A couple of HIAs this week, Rapana, Meany and Wade Egan all missed this week under the mandatory stand down. Any thoughts on any of that, boys?
Oh, Kikau seems like he's he's run into a bit of bad luck recently, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Gone from 3 weeks to now 12 on top of it. The Dogs are cursed at the moment. They can't seem to keep anybody on the field except for probably Reid Marnie and Burton are the only two that seem to be on the field every week.
They'll be happy you've singled them out.
Yes. Yeah, we'll see how good a Bocco I am up to your standards. But yeah, there was two blokes that probably don't deserve ACLs are the two that copped it this week as well, in Brayley and Dewey. So that's 3 for the same knee, is it?
Yeah, maybe it's definitely the same knee as
Second one.
01, 21. I'm not sure if it's the third on the same one.
And Brayley can't take a trick either.
Was that
played
him
about
last
8
year?
games. Jaden Brayley, the whole year last year and most of the year before. I think he's played about 7 games in 3 seasons now.
Yeah. Unfortunate for them. We have seen as people get older, they do I guess have better luck as it goes on. But knees, I know from experience, once your knees go sometimes, and it's not ideal. Anything else you want to touch on around the grounds, or anything you've heard from the week?
Ollie, got any thoughts?
I wasn't going to bring it up. I thought you were going to bring it up, but there's been a bit of controversy around the Martin Tapau V trigger to Gordon Rafferty that left him in a pool of claret.
Keep going, yeah.
Yeah, well, personally, like I've seen debate, and I get that it was an accident, but I've always maintained an argument that it's just a totally different story when it comes to a player's head. And in the rule books, I'm pretty sure, even if it's accidental, if you make contact with the head, it's a penalty. So I don't know where the confusion is there for a lot of people. I understand that there's an argument. I believe that if there is an accident and you can tell it's an accident like that, maybe you should just leave it as a penalty, not necessarily go and punish the player, put them on report or anything, because Martin Tapau couldn't get out of the way. But when a bloke's laying there and he's got blood spitting out the back of his cranium, I mean, like, something's got to be done, surely.
I thought it shouldn't have been a penalty. I disagree. I thought the bunker and the ref had no idea what to do. They just saw blood everywhere and, oh shit, we've got to do something here, and blew a penalty and made something afterwards. They called it careless, and he was since cleared by the match review committee, so can't have been too careless. I think if he didn't slow down and had been careless, he runs straight past him and misses him. I think the fact he took care is what caused the issue. So the definition of careless annoys me. It cost Brisbane the game, I think. In my humble, I was going to save this to the game. But is it the most disgraceful thing I've seen? Yeah, no, probably not. But it's I disagree with you a little bit, Ollie. The hip drop, similar thing. Both Preston and Murray, I think, were both cleared after the fact. Preston was unlucky. I thought the Murray one was much worse. But Preston's making a tackle, bloke's running. Where was he supposed? I don't know where he was supposed to go. Because if he just lets go and he runs off and scores, everyone's calling him every name under the sun. So I don't quite know what to go with that. I take bigger issues with cannonballs and as I've been on record for 3 years of saying. Barn, what do you think? Am I right or wrong? Or
well, the Preston one, he ended up going for the strip, I think, and just fell off the ball, and that's why he ended up down near his feet, and he was nowhere near the back of his legs either. So
it just so happened to land on his ankle more than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's right. He sort of landed at the front of his feet, and his foot was in the vicinity. So yeah, the hip drop one seems to be getting a little bit nitpicky, but they really want it out of the game. So if they're going to continue down that way, there's nothing we're going to do or say is going to change that. The Rapana one is he doesn't drop the ball if he doesn't get hit in the head with the knee.
I understand that as well, and that's a tricky.
Game stops.
That is a tricky thing.
The game breaks down either way.
Yeah.
The fact, I think if you go back and look at it, and you look at Capewell, who was in exactly the same position. Capewell stops about 2 metres before Tapau does. And he moves to the side and he makes sure that he doesn't make contact with Rapana until he has the ball in his hands. Whereas, obviously, Martin Tapau's he basically wants to obliterate him as soon as he catches him. And he was, realistically, if he'd slowed down 1 or 2 steps earlier, he doesn't make contact. He can flop on top of him. He can dive into him with his shoulder while he's on the ground. If he'd slowed up that fraction earlier. So I think that's where it does sort of come into that. What's that?
He'd have given a penalty if he'd stopped and dived on him, I reckon.
Possibly, yeah.
Unless it was a flop or something.
Oh, not if there hadn't been a hand put on him.
Yeah.
So unless he contacts the head, but yeah, I think that's where you can probably get away with actually deeming it as a careless action. The fact that he knew he was never going to get to the ball. He was hoping that Rapana stayed upright when he caught the ball, so he could just hit him through the ribs and just smash absolute shit out of him, and hopefully get him to drop the ball. The fact that that didn't happen, he was going out of his way to try and hit him as hard as he possibly could the moment he touched the ball, and the fact that the ball ended up in a different position was the reason why he ended up collecting him with his knees in the head. So I can see where it was a penalty, and I probably agree with it not being a charge at the end of the day at the match review committee either. So.
No, fair commentary. Yeah, and yeah, that's not to say I think either are wrong. I just that's the way I interpret it. I'd meant to save that for the game itself, but let's get that out of the way early. Anything else, Oliver? The NRLW is coming together quite nicely from what I've seen. New clubs are filling up their stock. Players
are finally starting to sign with clubs. I think they were able to earlier, but due to the
CBA.
The whole collective bargaining agreement and everything, that sort of stalled for a bit. But it's good to see everything's functioning as it should be now.
And is that the same as in the past? It just runs concurrent with the last X amount of rounds?
Yeah, it does. But yeah, obviously with the new clubs coming in, the 4 new clubs, the season's extended a little bit.
Cool. Barnes going for a wander off here. He is. Anything else, Ollie, that you've taken opinions from? Ratings look good. Fox seem to be outdrawing Channel 9 from what you tell us.
Yeah, so the ratings site that I use, Fox have outdrawn Channel 9 for all 3 games this week, and over the past few weeks, it's sort of slowly been going this way. It's not necessarily that Fox's ratings are going up. It's actually that Channel 9's ratings are dropping. So make of that what you will. I saw a lot of comments. People are saying it's down to the commentary or whatever, but at the end of the day, it is concerning when most people have free-to-air TV. Well, most people do have free-to-air TV, but not everyone has Foxtel. I don't know the exact amount. That would be less.
Excuse me, ignorance. Is streaming counted in that, or is it?
No, it's not. So that's also important to note. So
that'd actually be bigger, because I would suggest, I know I do, it's either streaming through KO or the Foxtel app.
Yeah, 100%. So on Channel 9 alone and on Fox alone, which I would still say is where most viewers are, the traditional networks, Fox, they've outdrawn Channel 9 for all 3 games this week, which I'm sure it's happened at some points before in the past, but it's very concerning when the network with the much higher exposure distribution is starting to crumble a little bit.
I would suggest a large number of those, or the demographics, would be the older free-to-air demographic too. I'm sure, like me, my people in our sort of age bracket would be streaming or watching on iPads and laptops and the like as well. So, interesting.
Well, something to note as well, like you bring up sort of the older people as well. I know, like my own grandmother, for example, recently got KO just so she could watch the footy. So she's obviously using that now. So I think with the rise of streaming, it is probably as well hurting Channel 9 a bit, because with KO or Fox, you can watch every game live every weekend, whereas with 9, you've only got the 3 games.
Yeah. 100%. Anyway, let's get into what happened over the Easter break, unless you got something else, Barn, you want to throw out?
No, not at all.
We kicked off Thursday night with one of the most underwhelming performances of the year to date, and that was the Roosters 8 being demolished by the Storm in the wet there down south. What does stats say, Barn? And you can lead us away here.
Yeah, we had 5 tries to 1, 3 out of 5 conversions for the Storm, 1 out of 1 for the Roosters, and 1 out of 1 penalty attempts for both sides. 39 out of 45 sets played, 21 out of 34, 350 plus running metres for the Storm, 4 line breaks to 1, 42 tackle busts to 16, 6 offloads from both sides, 2 forced dropouts to 1, a 40-20 kick by Melbourne, 313 tackles played, 410, 1 ruck infringement to 2, 1 inside the 10 to 2, 3 penalties conceded to 4, 8 errors to 14, 1 sin bin Grant with 35 tackles, Butcher with 49, Munster with 209 running metres, and Manu with 200 running metres. Munster with 114 Supercoach points, Meaney with 96, and then 3 other Storm players before you get down to Egan Butcher on 59. First 15, 20 minutes was sort of back and forth. Both teams would just sort of put the feelers out there and were going backwards and forwards, and the Roosters probably looked a little bit sharper in the middle of the field for that first 15-minute period. But as soon as Melbourne started shifting the ball wide and moving that big forward pack around, they just looked so much slicker ball in hand when it was going through the hands out to the centres and the outside backs. And they were just a lot more in sync than the Roosters. The Roosters got back to that point where they get sort of halfway across the back line and it just gets all clunky and they're not sure who's going where, what angles people are running, and it broke down time and time again for them.
I actually don't think it's a note I'd made, and it's a good point you raise. I don't think there's been a better team this year consistently for execution than Melbourne. It just seems every time they shift the ball, everyone is in the right spot.
And they're very controlled in this game as well. There was no panic. No,
they just sort of know that no one runs around in a circle, bar Munster.
Hughes will give it to Munster.
Ironically, it's the fact that Munster does run around in a circle that makes him more dangerous. Because when they just plug into that line, they tend to hang off, and if they do just go hands, they just don't get it wrong. But
they're all either moving in that sweeping motion to an edge, or then they've got angle runners coming back inside, Meaney back and through the middle, and that's what I get to time and time again. The really good attacking teams have 2 and 3 options. They give their ball players 2 and 3 options when they're near the line, and it just confuses the shit out of most defences.
Yeah.
When you're trying to cover 2 and 3 spots in a defensive line in the space of 10 metres, and you've got 3 blokes in there, they've all got to make a decision, and if they all don't make the same decision at the same time, the defensive line's all over the place. That's what the really good ball players do, I think, in the competition. But the Roosters played the last hour of this game was amateur. They dead set looked like amateurs running around there for this last half an hour. Constant penalties, constant errors, and it was at crucial times too. Whenever they seemed to get into good field position, they dropped the ball. Whenever they had the Melbourne on the back foot in their field position, they give away a penalty and let them out of pressure and go down the other end. I don't know how they got away with probably only getting beaten by 20 realistically. It looked to me at one point, especially with about 20 minutes to go, that Melbourne by all rights should just absolutely put 40 or 50 points on them. And that probably comes down to the fact that their defence is a little bit structured a little bit better than a lot of sides. But yeah, they were pretty, as you said, they were probably one of the worst performances of the year for that last hour of this game. And you don't need to invite Munster and Harry Grant down to your line and more than once. So once you get down there and you give them repeated opportunities, they'll carve you up. It was a big momentum shift was the 40-20, I thought, from Harry Grant as well. The game was still sort of a bit back and forth at that point in the 40-20, and they go down and score, and then scored I think it was not too long after that as well. And the Roosters, the heads all went down at that point, except for Manu, who seemed to be the only bloke trying out there at different times in this game, and he made some crucial defensive efforts, and Egan Butcher as well. But I thought the forwards worked pretty hard, but they were pretty. By the end of the game, they were pretty well beaten. The Roosters. Tyrell May was okay off the bench, and Egan was very good. And I mentioned Manu was fantastic, probably their best player, but was given no opportunities ball in hand. Kamika had a pretty good game with Josh King, I thought, for the Storm. Welsh and Katoa were very good, but it was Harry Grant, Meaney, and just to top that off, Cameron Munster decided to be twice as good as anybody on the field. Just showed the ball how a good 5'8" can pull apart a defence.
He's having one of his. Obviously had a great year now last year, but if he's not on the field for this year, the games they don't win the games they win this year, I think. And if he was playing for a lot of other teams, they'd be winning a lot more games. Everything he did was pinpoint. Both his coach tries were off his kicks.
Yep.
And he had involvement in a couple of others. I just think he's been outstanding. He's playing fullback this week with Meaney out. And just quickly on Meaney, he's plugged in fantastically. He's from where he's come from 2 years ago. I know he's never. That's a reflection of the club he was at more than probably the club than the player himself. But it's brought the best out of him. So
they never really gave him that many opportunities either. They give him 1 or 2 weeks.
I seem to recall that we were crying for him at times.
Yeah,
when they were chopping and changing.
They would play him at fullback for a week or two, like Barney said, and he would be their best back by far when he was at fullback, and then they'd plug
Averillo in and someone else.
Or Dallin Martinez-Lesniak, I think, was still milling around back then, and none of them were putting up the performances that he was, but it just so happened he'd get a crack once every 5 weeks, and it'd just be back in the rotation.
Ollie, what do you take out of this? Anything else?
Well, just to sort of add on to Barney's points here, we've spoken over the past couple of weeks in a couple of games, especially when we're talking about Brisbane, how their forwards usually lay that platform for their backs. They do the hard work early, and their backs benefit from it. They obviously set up the plays, get them in good positions. Melbourne's forwards were doing this. The Roosters forwards were not. Defensively, the Roosters forwards were fantastic. They had 4 players with over 40 tackles in their forward pack, but they only had 1 player run for over 100 metres, and that was Victor Radley. So when you're not having your forwards, obviously laying that platform, getting that go forward, you're not really able to set yourself up for anything, especially when you make 14 errors in a game like the Roosters did, 3 of those coming within the first 10 minutes as well. It was definitely a closer game in the early stages, I agree with Barney, but I think that just sort of set the tempo for the Roosters night in terms of being able to hold onto the ball. They were never really able to correct that. It wasn't as bad as it was that early on, but still the job was done, and that really killed them, those errors, to be honest. And the fact that their forwards just couldn't get going forward in attack again. They were great in defence. But then you look at Melbourne's forward pack, which on paper is a lot weaker. You had players doing work on both ends. King, Katoa, Kamakamika as well. At the end of the day, the Roosters just really cut themselves off at the kneecaps, I guess you could say.
I think in conditions like that as well, I'm not going to say you're being harsh on their forwards, but it's your outside backs that get you into that game. And you only got Drew Hutchinson making 50 metres. Not necessarily his fault, because it's not necessarily his position all the time, but their outside backs didn't necessarily. Manu, I think, ran 200, but they didn't. A lot of that scrappy stuff they didn't really get into, or they made errors on the way back. So it's funny how Melbourne, every time we doubt them, they tend to, but they keep plugging holes, and they now they've now got tent pegs in sort of Katoa and King that they can trust, and throw Walsh back in, who's shocked me finding form just in time for Origin. And he had a really good game, actually, Christian Walsh. They've got that's when you start dragging, as you mentioned, Kamakamika back into the game, and all of a sudden, oh hey, they're Melbourne again. Olam was very impressive. He's starting to look damaging again, so all across the board, you got to say it's as we seem to come back to most years. The more the stuff like this changes, the more they stay the same. Melbourne and Penrith look, almost at times streets ahead than some of the other teams we analyse. Is there anyone else we haven't touched on, Barn? Do you have anything else before I cut you off?
No, I think we've pretty much mentioned everyone. It's really disappointing with the Roosters for me at the moment, because one week they look half decent, then they look good, and then they look very average. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, to be honest. I know they do start slow a lot of the times during recent years, but it's just something. I don't know. I've got just a smell about them at the moment.
Is it too early to call them flat track bullies? Because it's starting to feel a bit that way for this year.
I think it's too early to be calling anybody anything at the moment, to be honest. There's still wait. You've still got 19 rounds of footy left to go.
Angus Crichton's back.
You can pretty much turn the ladder upside down minus 1 or 2 players, 1 or 2 teams, and wouldn't surprise me. But
I believe Napa, Crichton, and Nathan Brown are all playing for Newtown this week, so they'll start bolstering some stocks, at least their bench stocks. I assume at least two of them will definitely Guzzi will be, whether it's via the bench or whether it's back full time, will be back and either pushing a Butcher to the bench or some combination of all of that. But can't hurt, obviously, in not having Teddy Elps. But they just continue when they're not playing well to not be on the same page.
Yeah, they do. They get very confused with their ball movement when they're not playing well.
Yeah. I was with you, Munster 3, and I thought probably clearly. Harry, I had Meany 2, Harry 1, but any combination of that is fine with me.
That's
Welsh,
exactly what I had.
all right, cool.
I'm good with that too.
Well, how easy is that? Alrighty. I don't quite know how easy this game's going to be to analyse beyond saying that South's turned up and put in an A-grade South performance against essentially a reserve grade team by the end of the game. 50-16 was the score. Fox went down early, Barn, and then after that the edge was just in shambles on that side. Poor old Alamode stuck out there by himself, and things went from bad to worst.
100%. We had 3 tries to 9. 2 out of 3 conversions, played 6 out of 9, and 1 out of 1 penalty attempts for Souths. 25 out of 35 sets for the Dogs, 31 out of 41 for South Sydney. 634 plus running metres and 231 plus post-contact metres for South Sydney. 1 line break for the Dogs, 10 for South Sydney. 12 tackle buster, 30, 7 offloads from both teams. No forced dropouts, 140-20 by the Bulldogs, 376 tackles, played 230. Massive. 1 ruck infringement to 2, 1 inside the 10 for South Sydney. 11 penalties conceded by the Bulldogs, 3 by Souths. 10 errors to 13. Sinbin for the Bulldogs. Reid made 50 tackles. Cook made 31. Avarillo with 143 running metres and Latrell with 191 running metres. Latrell with 146 Supercoach points. Campbell Graham with 145. Walker with 132. 4 other South Sydney players before you got down to Reid on 7.
Ollie?
Yeah, well, there's not really too much to talk about in terms of what actually happened in this game because it was an absolute demolition job. One of the stories, though, I think one of you guys brought it up last week about how Latrell's just not quite been Latrell this season. Like, we are used to him sort of only chipping in when he's needed. He doesn't usually put in an 80-minute performance, so it just seems he felt like this week I'll have a crack for most of the game. And he got 3 tries and 2 assists, I think it was, something like that. And Cody Walker as well. We've given him a lot of flack this year, but in this game, it was sort of a perfect game set up for him where they start getting the momentum, they start scoring the points, and he sort of starts to turn it on and get a lot more confident within himself. And he set up a few tries as well. But on top of those guys, I want to bring up the 3 amigos, I'm going to call them for now on, because it's always these 3 blokes every single week in South Sydney's forward pack. Tom Burgess, Keon Kalamatangi, and Cameron Murray. The 3 amigos, all 3 of them got 130 plus running meters in the game. Plus Murray got 31 tackles, and Campbell Graham was great as always as well. It's pretty much everyone that we wrap every week for South Sydney. It's the same story. However, this time they were able to do more because they were up against an opposition that didn't really turn up. And I do want to acknowledge, yes, the Bulldogs have a weakened side, but I don't necessarily think having Kikau and TPJ in there would turn this scoreline around too much. They maybe wouldn't have conceded 50, but I feel like South Sydney were just on as well in this game, so full credit to them. Graham, 3 tries, 150 running meters, and made 15 tackles from 15 attempts, which you don't usually see centers making that many tackles plus not missing a single tackle either.
Haven't you heard he's the best defensive centre in the game? They
I know,
now
but
tell us every time he touches the
I've
ball.
heard it
too.
about 10 times this week. In this game, I heard it about.
At least we picked up on it 3 years ago.
Yeah, we've been saying it for quite some time now. Do give kudos to the Dogs. I thought they'd probably won the first 10 minutes of this game. They came out really were physical and fast at the start of this game. Really nice scrum play. And South Sydney had no idea it was coming for it to run away and Avarillo to score the first try of the game. But as soon as the tide turned, it was over and done with. Like as you mentioned, Latrell was getting involved, but getting involved when it mattered rather than because he's still been running close to 200 metres most games, but it's all been out of his back end and kick returns, kick return meters, whereas he hasn't been anywhere near as involved in the attacking setup as he was in this game. And got himself a hat trick. I think he gave Campbell Graham one of his, pretty much just handed him one of his tries as well. And then Walker was buzzing around and getting involved in the middle as well. I think that's the setup to their play. I think they've just got to really stay, unless they're going to go and shift early and try and burn someone on the outside. The backs just need to not be involved when they're in their own side of the inside of halfway, and just let their big guys roll through the middle like they do so well.
Especially when they're probably
Burgess,
close
Murray,
to the best
Cook buzzing around in there
play
as
the
well.
ball speed in there, and that's just from the eye. I haven't studied it.
When they get going.
Play the ball speed, the way they roll. Burgess,
Arrow
Murray,
back again this week is another one.
Arrow's a big in for that too.
Really plays like that as well. So, I think if they limit their time doing the dirty work with the back line, they can probably set up a little bit more like this against some of the better teams, and they'll go a long way to being very competitive, even against the better team. They are one of the better teams, realistically, if you look at it. They've probably been one of the more consistent teams this year, even though they have had I think pretty much every team's had a bad performance here and there so far through the 6-7 rounds of footy that we've seen. But you've said it all. They were brilliant when in attacking zones. The Dogs came out and put in another probably 10 minutes just after the second half as well. Like, I don't know, the coach seems to rev them up at the breaks, start of the game and at half time, because they look quite good again at first 10 minutes of the second half. But once again, the forwards just started rolling through the middle, and injuries and blokes. I think there was a 10-minute, there was a sin bin for Preston, which really killed off any hopes in that back end of this game.
Yeah. Is there anything you take out of your likes of your Harrison Edwards? And, we've seen enough of Preston now to say there's much there.
Yeah, no, not particularly. I think they're looking like a well-beaten pack if they're going to trot out this pack most weeks of the year. So, Max King's a superstar, and Preston's on his way to being there, but they need some of their other guys back.
I don't want
in a hurry.
Yeah,
they need Kikau. Kikau's not coming back for 3 months now, but they need Tavita Pangai back and whoever else they can get into that middle of the field.
Well, and here's the thing. Maybe you're right, Ollie. Maybe we're being generous, giving a bit of a benefit of the doubt, and that maybe they weren't missing that many. But Bulldogs fans get to have the excuse that they're now injured and their season's ruined, so that's what they'll do, and that's fine. So, and maybe they're not wrong. Maybe they're not wrong.
And they'll go out and sign another 5 players for $700K, and no one will mention a thing about it for the next rebuild for next year. So,
well, realistically, who's left? Crichton to come in. So, and they do have the Spruik halfback up their sleeve at some point. I'm sure he'll turn up at some point here. Olapau, whoever his name is that I keep and I apologise, keep mispronouncing. What else do you really take out of this? Don't know.
One thing that was alarming is when their defence fell apart, like the floodgates didn't just open; they just exploded, and there was holes all over the place.
I just want to also mention, look, let's be honest, you can't play Josh Reynolds on Cam Murray through the middle of the field and expect a result. He spent a big chunk of that back end, I assume defending at lock, but or at least standing there at lock. Don't know if he was defending too much, but he managed to stand in front of the play the ball 3 or 4 times when Reid was looking for him too, so that was good. But he got picked this week. Good on him. All right, 3 points Latrell, 2 points Walker or Graham, and throw in Murray, Burgess, whoever you want for 1 as well. Which way are we divvying them up?
I had Trell and Graham. Trell 3, Graham for 2, and I had Walker, Murray, or Reid, but Reid was probably a fair way behind the South players.
Yeah.
Well, Barney will probably go with Walker because he hates forwards now and he won't want to go with Cam Murray. So I think we should just go with Walker to save.
I'm okay with Walker, and he has had. We are quite critical of him. He's had a pretty good month now. He's at his best for the last month. We all good to keep plugging on?
Yeah, Burton and Reid were the really only 2 standouts for the Dogs in this team, I thought, realistically. The only 2 probably worth a mention out of this game.
We're going to get, I'd hope get today, but we'll try and get Trent on in the next couple of weeks. He's keen to. A good friend of the show and close Bulldogs watcher, and he's going to probably give us some thoughts on where they're headed and where they're at and what the future may hold in 2024. So looking forward to that. But until then, we'll move on to We've lost Ollie for the remainder of the show. Something's come up there, personal issue apparently, so hopefully it's all good at his end. Take a sec to plug rugbyleaguemerch.com to buy some hats and shirts and that sort of gear. Check them out as we head towards middle of the year and footy season ramps up. Next on the agenda, 32-22, the Dolphins once again, Dolphins won again, defeating the Cowboys this time, who at times perhaps their own worst enemy, Barn, but the Cowboys are they're just a little engine that could this year.
Story of the year, mate. It's just constantly making defensive errors and errors with the ball, shooting themselves in the foot, realistically. But 4 tries for the Cowboys, 6 for the Dolphins, 3 out of 4 conversions, played 3 out of 6 for the Dolphins, and 1 out of 1 penalty attempts. 25 out of 37 sets, played 29 out of 36. 7 line breaks for the Cowboys, 6 for the Dolphins. 34 tackle busts to 42. 4 offloads to 9, 2 forced dropouts by the Cowboys. No 40-20s. 280 tackles, played 289. 2 ruck infringements to 1, 1 inside the 10 against the Dolphins. 7 penalties conceded from both teams. 13 errors to 6. 2 sin bins to 1. Robson with 39 tackles. Jeremy Marshall-King with 41. Holmes with 155 running metres and Asako with 161. Amiso with 120 Supercoach points. Asako with 118. Gilbert with 106. And then Holmes on 88.
Where are we going to start there? I think the biggest talking point is, are you happy to pen the Cowboys yet? Or I think they drastically need to fix something up here. I know they get some cavalry back this week. But at times, I think every single one of their starting players missed multiple tackles.
Yeah, the defence is a big issue compared to last year. Very similar to the Sharks, to be honest.
They're in the same boat. Everyone except Kyle Felt missed tackles, and Kyle Felt made 1. So they were probably over. They were exposed here. I thought Jerry Marshall-King outplayed Robson.
It's fantastic.
And was really good. Didn't miss a beat from where he came back, and Katoa stepped into the 7 role pretty comfortably. I know there wasn't a great deal of pressure on him, but he got them around the park in fine enough style. The two obvious ones are the 2 that we'll plug here. Hammer is just has gone to another level this year. Obviously Bennett's got the best out of him. He's just your typical very hard trying fullback, part of everything, always in support. And always a danger because he can go to the line and pass both directions. And Azarko, who's having, I don't know if you can call it a breakout year, 10 years in, but he has been outstanding this year. We've been critical of him at times in the past. He had a handful of good games for the Titans, but he's just, he can do no wrong this year. He's just above and beyond. His kicking's fantastic. His finishing's great, making meters, breaking tackles. Just looks a danger every time he's got the ball.
Yeah, he's always had the skill set. He's just he's taken those games out of his repertoire where he'd have 3 and 4 errors and put his head down and go missing. Did a lot, especially for the Broncos at times last year and the year previous. But I barely think I've seen him make a mistake this year. He's always been a very good finisher, and he seems to actually be a bit fitter and a bit bulkier as well. Coming into this season, so put on a bit of muscle by the looks of it, and got himself a little bit fitter. He's doing fantastic things out on that right edge for the Dolphins. Cowboys just seem to expect to score every time they shift it past the halves. Like they just sort of seem to throw a cutout pass and expect to score points. Where it's just not happening this year. Like Holmes is just breaking the line at will, like he was at different times last year. The back rowers aren't making the impact that they were last year. And, their defence has fallen to pieces. That was what we praised them on all of last year, was their fitness. They just seemed fitter than every other team, and their defence was as strong as anybody in the game. They were up there with the likes of Penrith at times last year with their defensive.
Well, I think they were better until like round 23. They were the best defensive team in the comp.
And this year, it's they're conceding close to 30 points every week. I'd say that about a lot of teams as well, though. I think this year the attack definitely has been the flavour of the day. But I thought they probably looked to me like they were, after the first 15, 20 minutes, they were well in control and they were probably going to win this game. They started really well. And just on the fact that the Cowboys go out of their way to just throw cutout passes and expect to score out wide, the Dolphins do the exact opposite. They just work as hard as they possibly can through the middle of the field, and then once they've got that dominance in the middle of the field, they hit their edges with the likes of Hamaso and Asako. And by doing that, obviously, they compress the defence, which gives them a hell of a lot more time out wide, whereas the Cowboys aren't rolling through the middle this year. And when they shift it wide, the defence just moves with the ball and it's getting shut down pretty easily at different times. So I think they need to take a leaf out of the Dolphins book realistically and start really trying to hammer back through the middle of the field.
Yeah, Townsend does a lot of, how am I going to explain this? He does a lot of that, right, the plays in motion, my job's done. Like he'll spread it and you go, oh, it's up to Drinkwater or Val to do something. Now I've got them the ball. Whereas maybe he can be taking the line a bit more. Now it's trickier when your forwards aren't necessarily dominating, but maybe that's getting a bit exposed this year. And I think that's the key point. They feel not as fit, or other teams have caught up with them or started the year fitter. And you're just not as... I know they're missing a lot of size. I think they get Nanai back this week. Not that he's the biggest unit there, and someone else is back this week that'll help. But we're now up against, most teams now have big forward packs as well as some mobile back rowers. So it's a tricky thing to combat both against some of these. I'm concerned from. I just think but I have been all year since about round 3. So
round 2 or 3, you were saying.
Yeah.
But you look at the Cowboys. They started pretty quickly, but by the end of the first half, the Dolphins were well in front. They were just running roughshod over this Cowboys team. And every time it got to the edges of the field, they were just making massive inroads through either outside, beating the winger on the outside or shifting it back inside and aiming at the halves, which I think has been part of their problem, the defensive structure in and around the halves, which, again, is where a lot of teams send their attack. So, but the second half was completely different. Cowboys come out for that, 20 minutes, half an hour in the second half, and they were dominant. They looked like they were going to gather up the Dolphins and spin them out by the end of the game. But again, they just dropped off really badly. Like, you have to give credit to the Dolphins because there was probably a 10-minute period where I think they turned the Cowboys away about 4 times, about 10 minutes, where they were down there and looked like they should score, and they just kept turning up. They kept making tackles. I think there was 2 blokes held up over the line. And then they got their opportunity and they went straight down the other end of the field and they scored. Hamaso, I think, scored the last one, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, they scored late and that was the end of the game. As soon as the Cowboys let up that pressure that they'd been building for 25, 30 minutes, and I think it was off the back of the dumb error too.
No, they got the one off... Oh, no, it was Hammer. I thought there was 2 in the second half. No, it was just the one try in the second half. Sorry, I tell a lie.
And it was Will at the back end.
There was a penalty. There was a penalty late that
I think that
just put it back out to 8, and then Hammer scored.
Yeah, and the Dolphins just hung in there and fought tough, but they won it in the first half. As soon as the Cowboys sort of lost their momentum in that first half, they just went bang, bang. There's nothing the Cowboys could do about.
It's a sign of a good team that can put points on points. Like we see lots of teams, a lot of teams can't do it or back up, and whereas we've seen it. I think in all their games have put together back-to-back tries most games, and the same here. And
that catch off of Sarko from the kick across from Katoa, that was fucking outstanding. And
then his finish as well. Was brilliant.
Yeah, I think that was just beforehand. Yeah. Actually, beat him back inside and rushed off someone else to score as well.
Yeah,
and a lot of it comes off the back of Jeremy Marshall-King, as you mentioned. He's been owning the middle of the field pretty much every game he played, except probably last week where he was good, but he wasn't as dominant as he has been coming back from his injury.
Yeah.
When he gets out, starts running, he always just seems to pick the most perfect time to get out, run. And a lot of the times he still will pass the ball after he's gone through the line and somebody else will make another 10 metres on top of it.
Yeah.
And then he'll double down and go again from dummy half. Middle of the field's just completely shot.
Yeah.
But his stocks have risen massively in the last, 18 months?
Well, now you've got to, people were talking at Robson for Origin. Now, I would have him ahead of Robson. I know there's a few in front.
Robson was pretty good in this game too, to be honest. But yeah, Marshall King,
especially coming in as the running hooker. Marshall King had him covered well and truly in that department. But what else do you say? The astute purchases, your Bromwich boys, Gilbert working his ass off, and
he was fantastic.
And the professor again does a mountain of that dirty work once he gets on the field.
Doesn't he? What? Drinkwater had a couple of nice touches, but then he seemed to gas out after about that sort of first little period. As I said, when the Cowboys dropped off in momentum, he really wasn't getting involved at all, especially towards at the back end of the game. He had, apart from the two really nice cutout balls that he set up tries for, that was about his entire involvement in the game, realistically. They probably needed him at the back end of it. Felt and Val were pretty good, I thought. Probably their best, actually, for the Cowboys. But Hiku and Elliott were not good. They were very poor in this game, and a lot of that was just that's where a lot of the Dolphins were opening them up for points. They just turned the two centres inside, turned that left-hand side inside out with Hiku and Elliott, just continually harassed them all night. Robson and Cotto were pretty good, and I thought Hess had another strong game. I think he's been pretty good this year.
He's having probably his best run so far in an average team. Right? Yeah,
no, absolutely. And the Dolphins, it was just a team effort. I don't think there was a bad player on the field for him, realistically.
No.
Herman SASA had a really good game off the bench. Super strong carrying the ball for him. Considering I think that's his second game back. Might have been his first game back. I thought he's really good off the bench. You mentioned Kenny Bromwich and Nichols were really good in the middle. And the other four that we mentioned, the four that we've talked about for, 5 minutes in Gilbert's, Jeremy Marshall-King, Hamiso and Azako, they were just brilliant. They were absolutely the difference in the game. They well and truly beat their opposition.
Are you now treating Dolphins as a proper threat? As in, they're now, you treat them as any other sort of middle range, bottom of the 8 teams?
To me, I'm thinking they're probably going to beat 10 teams.
Yeah, I think
9 times out of 10.
And if not, they're going to make you beat them.
Against them.
And it goes back to just having, like, some of those bodies on the bench. We don't really need to analyse the game too much further, but you see some teams that have, we've seen a lot of teams this year end up with a young backline player on the bench or a young forward on the bench that doesn't do a lot, gets exposed, or is just there to get some greenness off. They've realised they've got a team that they need to keep a strong rotation with, and they've got Ray Stone, who's always been a warhorse, and Mark Nichols coming on. And the only one they're just the only one they're blooding is Donahue, which is fair enough, but he's not going to play massive minutes behind Marshall King, and that's it just keeps that intensity on the field. Whereas some, even Parramatta, you notice their drop once those two front rowers go off. You see the change in the Parramatta team, for example.
Massively.
So I think that's just another bit of astute Bennett. Coaching, I suppose. Who are you doing? 3 for Hammer? How are we doing this?
Yeah, I had Hammer with the 3. I had Gilbert with the 2.
Yeah.
And then toss up between Jeremy Marshall-King or Asako.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I give it to Asako. I don't know who we've become anymore, giving wingers points every week. But anyway, we get
where most of the entertainment's come from this year. To be honest, there's been some terrific output. Some of the wingers this year.
Oh, absolutely. And game-winning outputs. Clearly game-winning outputs. 20-18, we thought this may be close, and the Dragons held in well enough. In fact, 3 tries all, Barn, and penalty.
You've just jumped 2 games.
Oh, what have I done here? Sorry. Oh, yeah, we've got Penrith. Sorry, we didn't talk about Penrith. Now we should talk about this one. Another disappointment this weekend because I had high hopes for Manly, and maybe they're just Manly because it seems to be the trend of what they do. At times, it's just collapse.
I mentioned the first 2 games how good I thought their defensive impact was and how they were putting blokes on their backside consistently. Didn't happen in this game. They got walked through at different times in this match. Penrith were red hot, realistically. They had 7 tries to 2, 7 out of 7 conversions, played 2 out of 2. 1 out of 1 penalty attempts to Penrith. 37 out of 44 sets, played 29 out of 37. 932 plus running metres for Penrith. 12 line breaks to 0 42 tackle bust to 17, 11 offloads to 8, 4 forced dropouts to 1, a 40-20 for Manly, 292 tackles played, 315, 1 ruck infringement, 4 for Manly, 1 inside the 10 for Manly, 11 penalties conceded by Penrith, 9 by Manly, 7 errors to 9. Hoskins made 31 tackles. Jake Trbojevic with 45, Brian Toto with 246 running metres and close to his best in this one, and Jake with 119 running metres. Dylan Edwards, 163 Supercoach points. Nathan Cleary, 150. Brian Toto, 112. And then 4 other players before you got the DCE on.
Jake didn't miss one either. I think he's the only Manly player that didn't miss a tackle. So
Jake was fantastic.
So
he was their best player.
No surprise. No, absolutely. Once these edges fell apart, I don't know what more we say apart from Penrith are very good at what they do, and their attack's now clicking. They're in sync. They're now in sync. Hoskins and Sorensen was good both sides of the field, just being that player in between. But the most important thing is that the dummy half, Yo and Cleary, have their timing now, and that shines through, and it makes a difference.
You can see Yo's and Cleary are both back that fraction. I think they're getting a little bit quicker service out of Martin. I think it's been something that Kenny. Something that they've really been pushing to get him to, rather than halfway stand up and pass the ball, they're just really working on him service straight off the deck. And it's given them that little bit more time, but it also helps when you run for 1,000 extra metres through the middle of the field than your opposition. Their defence in the middle was really poor at times, Manly. And from minute 1 to minute 80, pretty much Penrith were just superior in every position on the field as well. Like, I don't think there was apart from him, as I mentioned, maybe Jake, like he probably matched up with whoever he was matched up against, but there wasn't another person that got close to matching their opposition out of the Manly side. The fitness levels, physicality, skill, every aspect was won well by Penrith. Tuilagi and KO Weeks were just constantly, repeatedly penetrated forcefully on that.
Tuilagi. Well, look,
edge defence.
There wasn't.
Penrith just went out of their way to absolutely terrorise those two.
Yeah.
And Tuilagi didn't know what shoulder to tackle with, and KO Weeks didn't know what Tuilagi was doing. So between the two of them, there was just holes. Like there was a 5-10 metre gap that every time they went there, at best they were making half a tackle. Most of the time they weren't doing anything. They were just getting bounced off, and Penrith were going through to score points.
Tuilagi is an interesting one because I was thinking about him even when I was watching back the replay day, doing some notes, and Tigers were happy to let him go after he showed promise there. He had 2 good trials and maybe round 1 and round 2 actually, and then since then, like Bullimore might jump him by this round. To be honest, I don't. Especially defensively there. It's hard to... Yes, I have concerns there because it's not going to get any better. I think they're still missing the other 2 centres. Parker is an okay defensive centre, but as you say, they've got Weeks out there, and I don't think I think he's a junior sort of half, so I don't think he's had a lot of time out.
Well, they were playing him at 5'8", so he's defending in where Schuster will be.
Yeah.
If he ever comes back.
Yeah. Supercoach by the year
this week, has he?
Yeah.
But, and he was the smallest guy on the field. Penrith went out of their way to run Hosking at him all night.
Yeah.
Yo got over there and got a bit involved. Cleary was running at him. And between him and Tuilagi, they could not stop it. I think Penrith scored their first 2 or 3 tries down. Like, if it wasn't through that position, it was just outside of that position because of what they'd done to the defence.
Well, I think Edwards ran through about 6 of them looking at each other.
Yeah, absolutely. They're just completely shot. And after it was about 20-odd to nil or 20-odd 6, they went down the other side of the field and started tearing that side apart as well. The defence was a little bit stiffer out there, and they had to probably push a little wider to score points. But
I don't. Good on Dylan Edwards. What did he get? 4 tries. Valid reward for what he's done for 2.5 years now. Yeah, 2 years. That's right. So that's been what else are we going to say now that we have that isn't obvious to anyone that Manly
should have got beaten to nil, really.
Yeah.
If Penrith were being ruthless,
Well, what was one?
This
One
should
was
have
just
been
a grubber
50 nil,
behind when they
60 nil. They were
game
both
was
off kicks,
over,
I'm pretty
and
sure. Brian Tato might have dropped one, I'm pretty sure, that bounced up in Tommy's
yeah,
lap,
yeah,
and then the other one was just a little
it
grubber
was a grubber
through
for
behind.
Saab. Yeah, so this could have been 60-0 realistically the way this panned out. All I'll say is this similar to Melbourne, they're now hitting their stride and they're doing their job, but they're beating. I don't want to say they're flattered, but they're starting to feel like minor premier material already.
They're doing their job as good, if not better than anybody else.
I saw an article today, just quickly, just for something to talk about for 2 minutes, suggesting that perhaps Penrith can only keep one of Edwards or Luai, assuming they'll both end up on, say, 758 and upwards. Who are you looking at?
If I was buying them for my team, I'd be buying Edwards first.
Yeah.
Realistically, I probably wouldn't even be looking at Luai. I know he gets a lot of raps for playing for Samoa, and to be honest with you, I don't think I've seen more than probably 7 or 8 above average games out of him in the last 2 years.
I remember one he beat the Bulldogs himself, and one he beat. There was another good game he had, and a bit like I could name.
Don't get me wrong, he does a job, but he's never really a standout in the side.
I hate to say this, I have a feeling. And that I think they'll assume either way they've got positions covered. Like if Edwards goes, they've got Taruva, or they've got they'll have blokes coming out their eyeballs. But I have an awful feeling someone like Luai could end up at the Tigers on $1 million and just doing nothing for 4 years. You know what I mean?
Possibly.
It's just
it is a hard one because obviously the halves have probably a higher skill set than a fullback. Edwards type fullback anyway, because you don't really see him getting in the line and ball playing as much as some of the other fullbacks in the competition. But the fitness and the effort and determination you get out of Edwards is something that's really hard to find anywhere else. So,
but that's starting to come as well. The more he's growing into it, we've seen more of that this year from him than we had probably ever. Sort of ball playing and getting involved. So
it really started last year, but he's even working on it again. But as you mentioned, I'd be signing Edwards before I was signing Luai.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, but knowing the club I follow, it'll be the other way around, and we'll go through the same song and dance again till 2030. Interesting to give 3, 2, and 1 to. I sort of feel like it should be Cleary, Yeo, and Edwards, but Edwards scored 4. You can make an argument for all the outside backs. So what do you reckon?
Yeah, I tossed up between Cleary and Edwards. So I ended up giving Edwards the 3.
Yeah.
It's not many times you're going to score 4 tries in a match. Cleary with the 2. And then I had, either Brian Toto go for the 1. Just Toto was back to his 200 metres and he was doing all that grunt work out of the back end, which Penrith has sort of been missing that little bit, I think, recently. Taruva's been trying to do it, but he just hasn't had as much impact as what Brian Toto does when he gets in there and has a go.
Mm-hmm.
I had a feeling that Toto may have been carrying a leg injury, to be honest.
We don't know, as I said, we don't know. There's 2 games at least where no one's kicked to him, so maybe we don't necessarily know. Why not? We're all winged up today, so give it to another winger. 1 point to 2-0. Now we get to the 20-18, the Dragons and Titans. What do the stats say here?
You've jumped another one as well.
How have I jumped? What have I done?
Broncos Raiders.
Where did I type it? Oh, yeah, sorry, I did put it here. I just wrote about the penalty. Go on, do that. Do the stats.
You just wrote about the penalty.
Yeah.
3 out of 3 tries, 1 out of 3 conversions for the Broncos. Yeah, Reynolds had a bad day with the boot. 3 out of 3 for the Raiders. 1 out of 1 penalty attempts for the Raiders. 30 out of 42 sets, 30 out of 38. 180 plus running meters for the Broncos. 3 line breaks to 4. 41 tackle busts, 30. 12 offloads from both teams. No 40-20s. 297 tackles played. 370 made by the Raiders. 1 ruck infringement to 2. 2 inside the 10 against the Raiders. 6 penalties to 5. 11 errors to 9. Ricky made 37 tackles. Whitehead made 41. Haas with 203 running meters. Sebastian Chris with 169. Rapana with 89 Supercoach points. Walsh with 86. And Haas with 79.
Well, yeah, we've...
man. Seriously, you have to say well done. They were getting beaten in the middle of the field. They were on the back foot for large parts of this game and had to scramble and continually turn up and make tackles and turn away the Broncos. Because the Broncos were camped down on their line for extended periods in this game, and the Raiders just kept showing up, kept hitting in defence. They never got bullied. They're just continually determined in the middle of the field, and they matched it, if not won it, apart from probably Payne Haas in the middle of the field by the end of this game. It doesn't help that Flegler got knocked out and is gone in the game, but he probably wasn't going to go and destroy him through the middle of the field either. I thought Jared Croker fixed up some of those glaring defensive issues that you've seen out of Harley Shields recently. Didn't miss a tackle. Didn't look like missing a tackle, actually, considering the bloke couldn't make one last year when he was running around for Canberra. Probably didn't help that he had his shoulders hanging off, but I thought he was quite good in his return. Did nothing wrong.
There still must be even just it's nice having a 300-game player back on the field, regardless of
absolutely
for the club
7
itself.
to go now, so hopefully he gets there by the end of the season.
His arms both stay sticky taped on, and good luck to him.
Absolutely. And he was really controlled on both sides of the ball, which is something that you couldn't say out of Harley Shields. He was sort of panicking in defence and attack, realistically. He really seemed to know. I don't know if that was just a mental thing or what it is, but apparently he's got plenty of skill from everyone that you hear from. But who knows? First try was really good depth. They played out to that right-hand side, and they got really deep, and they had option runners and ended up scoring in the corner. But I thought that was a really nice bit of play for Canberra that we haven't seen from them early this year. Cobbo finished really nicely there for the Broncos, but then it was a really simple try from Rapinoe to score from dummy half. Just brushed a couple off, and then if the Broncos don't concede that try, the game probably changes. Canberra aren't as up and about on top and in front at that time of the field, and Broncos could probably put a bit more pressure on. But I thought that was just a really soft try there from the Broncos, and it was off an error as well, which they turned it back to the Raiders to give them the opportunity, and then they couldn't stop it either. So, Canberra were gone with about 15, 20 minutes to go. I thought the Broncos were just going to go, bang, 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 score 3 or 4 tries and win this game. And they just, it summed up their entire night, really. They just kept turning up. They really determined and just kept making efforts.
Yeah, even that tackle. And look, I do say that penalty cost them the game, and rightfully or wrongfully, but even without that in there, it still felt that they were going to get home. And Canberra scrambled right to the 80th minute.
Yeah, it did.
Couple that performed
quite well. The last pass probably summed up the Broncos' night, really.
Yeah, well, if that stinks, you don't know.
Throwing it 10 metres behind the winger and into touch. That was just... They seemed to go really well up until the last pass. Yeah, the last pass just did not stick for the Broncos all night.
No, that was... I think you just put it... I don't know if it's just they need to freshen up or whether it's just a bad night. I think you just sort of put it down to that and go back to the mean.
Yeah, you don't worry about this
one of those games.
They've lost 1 out of 7. So
yeah, out of the Canberra, Horsburgh keeps overperforming. He's been great all year.
Absolutely,
really good. And I thought Whitehead defensively was pretty good here as well. He was in quite a bit of a scramble. Yeah, so good on him. Like I'm trying to think else to talk about. Rapinoe, you know what you get. He tries his ass off.
I thought the bench for Brisbane was really poor. I thought they had no impact at all, really. And Capewell and Mann, Ezra Mann, probably had their worst game of the season.
Ricky was Ricky had a pretty good game. He's had a good season, Ricky.
Yeah, he's been going really good the last probably month. And he started okay as well. Reynolds and Carrigan were okay. Throw Cobbo in there. Welsh and Haas were the best of the Broncos again. But couldn't get them over the line in this one. The Raiders are pretty strong across the field. No massive standouts, but Gula again was someone who was decent was going pretty good off the bench, and Hawira and Naira. You mentioned Horsburgh and Young were probably their best forwards. Rapinoe cashed in with a couple of tries. That does what he did. He had one of his better nights. He didn't really make an error and was well positioned for most of the nights.
How do you treat Canberra? Do you want to see this again from Canberra, or do you think
absolutely? Well, it's pretty much. This is going to be their season. Like they're going to have to play like this most of the season to win.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't seen them blow anyone off the field, and see it very often.
I mean, they've got Dragons. I
Might
think they've got
happen once or
Dragons this
twice,
week, and
but-
I've spent too long tossing the coin on that one. So
But even then, you struggle to see any sort of real flashy or brilliant movements of the football, apart from the first one in this game, which I thought was quite good. And if they can get to doing that 2 or 3 times a game, they might be okay. But yeah, they're really going to have to back themselves in on defence and toughness through the middle of the field.
how are you splitting up some points here?
Ooh, what did I have? I had Fogarty with 3, actually. I thought his kicking meters were fantastic.
Actually,
He got him around the
just
field.
we didn't even mention him, but he's someone we've sort of been keen to see have a proper run after some injury, and he hasn't really had his best flow, but yeah, probably his best kicking performance.
Absolutely, and a lot of it came down to, because Canberra, as I mentioned, were on the back foot for large parts of this game, and he got them back down the other end of the field time and time again. You know, they'd be on their own 40-metre line, and he'd put it down into a corner. And they're tackling the Broncos on their 20-metre line, so to consistently do that makes a massive difference.
Yeah,
I thought he set up a try or 2, pretty sure, one off a kick, and he was a big part of that first try with going through the hands. So I had with 3, I had Haas with 1, then I had either Walsh or Rapana. Sorry, Haas for 2 or Walsh for 1. Probably even throw Horsburgh in there if you wanted to.
Give it to Rapana. I thought he had a pretty good game. Give him one for
Might not be playing for a couple of weeks.
his blood loss.
So he's going to have a headache.
They try and scrape blood back into him. Cool. The long-awaited Titans-Dragons clash. I'm excited to get here, as people couldn't tell. It took place. It was 3 tries all, Barn. What did the stats say?
Yeah, 3 tries all. 3 out of 3 conversions for the Titans, 2 out of 3 for the Dragons. 1 out of 1 penalties for both teams. 29 out of 40 sets for the Titans, 37 out of 34 for the Dragons. 6 line breaks to 3, 49 tackle busts, played 38. Defence was a priority. 12 offloads to 13. 1 forced dropout by the Dragons. 0 40-20s. 346 tackles, played 310. 5 ruck infringements to 2. 0 inside the 10s. 2 penalties conceded to 8 for the Dragons. 11 errors to 9. A sin bin for the Dragons. Stimson made 41 tackles. Jaden Sewell with 36. Sammy with 275. And Ravalawa with 171 running metres. Sami made 112 Supercoach points. Campbell with 98. Sexton with 95. And then Ben Hunt with 88.
He's pretty good, Ben Hunt. He's not a bad footballer.
Dragons dead set. They've only got themselves to blame for the losing this game.
Yeah, you can only do so much. But they looked like, I thought they were the better team for the large part. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, they've only got themselves to blame, I thought. Both teams worked pretty hard for lots of the game. But again, it's the discipline and errors at crucial times of the match. Like, a couple of minutes to go, Ben Hunt drops one. With them on the tack around about halfway line, was probably close to their last chance match. Almost every time that the Titans got down the other end of the field to score, it was off an error from the Dragons or a penalty that was given away for something stupid. And they gave away quite a few penalties. Like 2 to 8 makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
In any game. And some of them were just really lazy, swinging arms, into the head and just really stupid
Molo does the same thing every week now. He's been picking for. Sewer was pretty lazy at times in some of his. I think he gave away a few rock infringements even late in the game when they marched him up the field there. But it's across the board. It's just
And they were sloppy in defence, like to miss 49 tackles as well against the Titans team that hasn't been carving everybody up in the competition. You know what I mean? Like they haven't been putting on 40 line breaks against 40 tackle busts against anyone realistically, and like Tino was doing a job, but he wasn't rampaging over people, nor was Fafita realistically, except for 1 or 2 runs. So Sami was carving some people up. He had his best game in a long time. His footwork looked really crisp, and he looked probably quicker than I've seen him for a while, to be honest. I know he's always been fast, but he just seemed to have a bit extra in his acceleration in this game for some reason.
A bit fitter too, actually.
Yeah, he's definitely come back fitter since his layoff at the start of the year. This game was a bit of a bludger, realistically. Like, the interest was kept because it was so close, but it broke down and got sloppy so many times. Some lazy defence, and each team just seemed to take 10-minute periods of, oh, we'll be good for 10 minutes, and then you can be, then we'll be shit for 10 minutes, and you can be good for 10 minutes. And it just, went back and forward like that for most of the match, I thought.
So just looking back at the errors, Sloan 4 errors and 3 handling errors. So 7 errors from Sloan, 4 from Hunt, 3 from Lomax. And you felt sorry for Ben Hunt in the last one, but it's just to your point earlier. I was just trying to find the stat, but sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, Tanner Boyd would be pretty happy with his little clutch performance there, with the game on the line from the sideline straight down the hey little as Mossy would say. But that was a beautiful kick in the clutch moment. Just one of the highlights of the game, realistically, apart from Philip Sami with a couple of really incisive runs, beating 3, 4, 5 people in one 10 sort of metre run. It was very much back and forwards sort of tradesman-like footy for a good hour of this.
And what do you make of the two sort of talking points? Campbell and Sexton returned to first grade. They did their job without being as blowaway as obviously.
Sexton was quiet for big parts of the game. Obviously, he got the crucial match-winning try where he stepped through a few and got that last try. But his kicking game was okay. I thought it was good, especially on returns since he's been out for so long. But then he goes and breaks his wrist. So poor bugger's now out for 4 or 6 weeks. I think Campbell's been pretty good in every performance he's had this year, to be honest. Still sort of, I know AJ's being out is probably the only reason he's there, but it's sort of amused me why he hasn't been at least the 14.
Yeah.
Majority of the season.
He has, I think, since round 3, has he?
Yeah.
But he's always dangerous. He's got enough footwork, and he's smart enough to stay in and around the play a lot of the time. So
and that acceleration over that 10 or 15 metres, which catch anyone if you get him in a good position and put the acceleration on.
Yeah. And the usual.
I thought young Couchman from the Dragons was pretty good off the bench for him. He's very good off the bench, really. Jaden Sewer and Ravalawa were really good. I thought Jack Bird was good again as well. He's probably been close to their best player this year, outside of Ben Hunt. And Hunt was the Dragons' best player by a fair distance again. Would have liked to see him have a little bit more impact close to the line. He just sort of sat back and fed it to his outside backs rather than sort of attacking the line a bit. But most of the Titans forwards were pretty good. I thought Kelly was okay out wide, but Feeder and Tino really made the difference in and around the ruck. Campbell and Sammy were probably the best of the outside backs. Sammy was fantastic. Sammy was man of the match in my opinion.
And Mo did miss a tackle, so big 3 forwards you've covered off there.
Mo didn't miss a tackle.
Yeah. 31 and to go these 100-odd metres. The only other Titan outside the 2 you mentioned that made 100. Give it to Sammy then. Why not? 2 to Hunt?
Yep, absolutely. And then I either had Campbell or Fafita.
Give it to Campbell. That's fine with me. But you take away not much from this game. Both these teams could get tailed this week.
Both teams are sort of both on the same level, realistically, and that's probably on and around the edge of the bottom 4. So if they keep playing like that, they'll be lucky to miss the bottom 4.
Yeah. The Knights 34, Warriors 24. 2 teams that won't be in the bottom 4, in my humble opinion, although the Newcastle might have to forfeit a couple of games if they keep going. Poor bastards. Well, just lost Brayley as well.
Run out of players.
Yeah, but
bringing the under 18s side.
But give us the stats because I enjoyed this game actually.
I really enjoyed this game as well. 6 tries to 4, 5 out of 6 conversions for Newcastle, 4 out of 4 for the Warriors. 33 out of 39 sets played, 34 out of 40, 300 plus running metres for the Warriors, 5 line breaks to 4, 37 tackle busts to 24, 6 offloads apiece, 2 forced dropouts by the Warriors, no 40-20s, 348 tackles played, 354, 2 ruck infringements to 1, 4 inside the 10 against Newcastle, 1 against the Warriors, 5 penalties conceded to 7, 7 errors to 9. Brayley made 42 tackles. Curran with 57. Miller with 182 running metres. And Chance Nickel-Klopstad with 229. Pompey with 110 Supercoach points. Marzu with 92. And Chance with 92.
Where do we start? I don't know how this has happened, but somehow Newcastle have become my favourite team to watch just about most weeks because they don't play boring games, but they've got... well, first of all, they try their ass off. Some of... there was a couple of... Who made the bust early, and there was 6 or 7 blokes chasing him in cover defence. They ran down. Miller ran him down, but I can't... Kossi made a bust early, but they just get in and they save a lot of... They conceded some soft shit later, but... early on, they saved. They get in and work hard for each other. I'll say more than save a lot of tries, but they're just razzle dazzle. Lockie Miller just lights like a player that can light everyone up is amazing to watch, and from anywhere in the field. And Dom Young's formed a pretty good combo where he knows to support him more often than not. And between the two of them, most teams aren't going to catch him if they make a break. But clever footwork as well from Lockie Miller.
And realistically, he's playing 6 in this team. I know they've got him at fullback, and he does occasionally pop up as a support player through the middle from that fullback position. But he's basically, he's you got when Tyson's there, he's playing more of a 13 role as attacking the line and then promoting the ball out the back to Miller, who's on the sweep around the back, and then Hastings is just doing the work in and around the middle of the field.
Yeah.
So all the backlines syncing up with the backlines down to Miller at the moment. He's basically playing like a 6 who's probably just playing that fraction deeper than most other 6s.
You got and there's just confidence in attack. Bradman Best still can't tackle, but he's did some nice attacking things. Beats blokes, and he's beating blokes again, which he hasn't done for a while. Clever little kick through for a try as well, and obviously Gay Guy when he gets involved, but.
The last couple of weeks.
It's been really enjoyable to watch. You mentioned Hastings. He's just in control. Like he just gets them where they need to be and gets them around the field. And I thought Johnson was just as good in regards to that. Sean Johnson's had a good year.
Definitely is.
I don't really knock him any further at the back end here. And they got away early. It was just that razzle dazzle. They get the first 3 tries. 3 tries.
Yeah, well, the Warriors seem to miss the jump. They come out pretty slow, I thought, in the middle of the field, especially. When the Knights are putting it up to your forward pack and actually pushing you backwards, there is a few blokes there, like in your Leo Thompsons, that have sort of jumped up and my expectation of what they were going to bring at the start of the year. And Brazil had a really red-hot start to this game. He realistically kicked on and had pretty good, probably 60 minutes. He was close to one of the better players on the field for an hour. But, I really thought that the Warriors missed the jump in the middle of the field for the first sort of 15, 20 minutes. And it wasn't until Curran hit someone in the head and until the pack seemed to get angry because they got a penalty against them. Curran hit someone in the head. And then they really got up and going back through the middle of the field. And they caused Newcastle problems after that point. But, it was just really too far gone after that first 15 minutes. They put on 16, 18 points.
I think it was pretty much try for try if you take out those first 15 minutes. So, again, though, both are a peg better than that last game. Chance having a great season again, 250 running metres and some nice involvements. Probably a little bit more flair than we'd seen from at Canberra. I know he was injured for.
I think that comes with confidence too, but
and he carried injury after injury
every other week.
Yeah,
injured.
Yeah.
Both teams put on some really nice tries. Really crisp ball movement, a couple of nice kicks, and guys climbing over the top of their opposition to score. And there was a couple of really good defensive periods as well. I think there was a period there where the Knights had about 7 sets, and the Warriors turned them away, and similar at one point there for the Warriors. For the Knights when the Warriors had the ball, and they were camped down there for a good 5 or 10 minute period as well. But I thought Tom Ale probably had close to his best game in first grade. He outshone this starting pack coming off the bench. He ended up playing 40 odd minutes and had a massive game. Seems to be getting that little bit fitter and a bit more game time. May even see him pushing into the start at some point. But also the starting forwards were good as well. So Vanilla Blake, Jazz Tavanga was good. Curran was really strong but a bit erratic. He seems to have
Isn't that
little
who? That's
periods where
just
he
who he is now. I think that's
loses his
just
mind and
yeah.
does a few silly things.
Yeah.
But it was probably his strongest game this year.
Yeah.
But he's back to the form at the back end of last year where he's just chopping blokes down and making some really good runs. I think he got up 40-odd tackles, really good running meters. So I thought he was good in this one. Lost my spot. Where was I? Chance, Nickel, Clockstad and Cossey were really strong, chiming into the background, and Pompey had his best game he's played in forever, I think. he looked really hard to stop. He's a big physical presence. They were just lining him up like a back rower at times up against his centre and busted over a couple of times for some tries. Sean Johnson was their best player, I thought, for the Warriors. Frizzell and Thompson were really good. Brayley was killing it until he got hurt. Until he's done his ACL again. Like, he was really controlling the middle of the field and causing all sorts of problems in and around the post, especially when they got close to the Warriors' line. But they didn't know which way he was going, and he was very deceptive there for a bit. He was making his million tackles like he normally does, but we won't see him again until next year.
Egan becomes a big out at the back end of the game and in general this week. I think that's part of it. They will obviously have someone who's quality who come. Oh, Freddie Lussie will come in this week, I assume. But
Freddie Lussie. I thought the halves were pretty good. Best and Marzu were very good, but Gago was brilliant. And Miller and Frizzell, they were their best three.
Yep. How are we divvying up some points then?
I ended up giving it to Frizzell.
Okay.
I thought he was instrumental in getting them down the field. He made some really good long-range 20, 30-metre breaks on that right-hand edge for Newcastle. And then when they started worrying about Frizzell, that's when Miller really got into his work and got him, played the players out the back of him. So I gave Gagai the 2 points. And I either had Sean Johnson or Miller.
Give it to Miller for one because, as I said, I've enjoyed him.
It's been fantastic, yeah.
Probably
glad we let him go.
Probably hard on Johnson, but anyway, well, both guys. But but you know, as a club, sometimes you accept that.
Should have written a letter.
You can't hold on to everyone.
But you would have got him for half the price of what they're paying Moylan to fucking run around.
Yeah, I know.
And I reckon you probably could have offloaded Moylan for half his contract. But anyway,
well, then he just re-signed him. So they didn't even need to
pay half his contract to get rid of him.
Yeah, well, they made their choices.
As they did.
And speaking of 28-22, Parramatta defeated the Tigers on Easter Monday. What did the stats say, Barn? We'll have a crack at this.
There's a little point there where we were thinking there might have been a miracle.
There's a little point
Same
there.
as last year.
Should have won the fucking game, but anyway.
Yes, absolutely. 4 tries to 5, 2 out of 4 conversions for the Tigers, 4 out of 5 Parramatta, and 1 out of 1 penalty attempts for the Tigers. 33 out of 43 sets played, 30 out of 38. 170 plus running metres for the Tigers and 138 plus post-contact metres. 6 line breaks to 4, 39 tackle busts to 17, 15 offloads to 8. Talk about winning the stats and losing the game. 4 forced dropouts to 0, 0 40-20s, 293 tackles made by the Tigers, 357 made by Parramatta. 1 ruck infringement to 4, 1 inside the 10 to 0. 3 penalties conceded by both teams, 13 errors to 12. Appy made 37 tackles, Madison with 42, Staines with 238, Madison with 191 running metres. Didn't do the Supercoach points because I normally like to leave it a day before I do it, and then I forgot about it.
I think Tupou at 100 odd and Moses at 100 odd. The rest are all whatever. This is again another tricky game to analyse because Tigers were the better team, and I'm going to feel dumb if I talk about it that way. But it's pretty simple. If Mitch Moses was playing for the other team, it's probably 40-10 at the end of the game. That said, you can't let teams march downfield 5 times in the whole game and score 5 tries, and that's what happened. The rest of it, they were camped in Para's half and just couldn't come up with, typical Tigers. There wasn't a lot of ball movement for the first 20. Once they finally
And that was probably too much for them.
once they had to chase, they were pushing stuff, and it.
Yeah, Junior Tupu with 111
There you
Supercoach points, Moses with 102, Madison with 80.
We'll start with Moses because you've got to wrap him because they obviously worked out that they had a bloke who's been playing back row all year out in the edge and kicked behind him twice and came out with 2 tries.
Absolutely.
And then his other couple of touches are very good too.
Did make a few errors and missed quite a few tackles, but at the end of the day, he got him home. Back of his boot.
Look, there was a bad luck for the Tigers. Like, as a Tigers fan, you're going, okay, that if this was just the first game of the year, you'd be pretty happy. But it's now 6 weeks in, and we've seen it all year. This is according to the Rugby League eye test. Actually, apparently they're the most in the entire NRL. They have they're second for average play the balls inside the opponent's 20, and lead the comp in total play the balls inside opponent's 20 metres zone. That's a big yuck. They're doing. You've got to see. You can't knock the purchases. Their forwards are doing their job. It's the obvious it isn't. So there was a bit of bad luck. Like if that Dewey kick goes for 40-20, or he doesn't do his knee. It's a different game. If Tupou just doesn't have a brain explosion, they probably win the game. If Stain catches that last kick, they probably win the game. So. I thought that all being said, it was Charlie Staines' best game of first grade. I thought he was pretty good.
Oh, absolutely.
Looked like an actual first grade fullback. He was in the right spot a lot. He's worked out, hey, if I just follow Appy around, some shit might happen. And shocked me when they were chasing the game. The best they actually looked, the Tigers, was when were just running through the middle. They had Appy, Simpkins and Brooks chiming in, just running. Instead of Brooks just running randomly around or just running like a back row, actually getting in and around the ruck. They looked dangerous for a bit through there. It was a star-making performance from Junior Tupou, who we've mentioned a little bit,
absolutely.
But he was clearly their best player. He was fantastic. He looked dangerous every time he touched the ball. He hasn't played a lot of rugby league in general. I think he's come from rugby, but he's still only young. He'll have more growing to do, and might be the most exciting win we've had since Taniela Tuaki or someone. I'll keep him and Kapoa together, even though they've got some learning to do. I think together they can be a dangerous attacking combination. Let's see how that happens after the bye. But obviously losing Dewey now we're back to the drawing board there. I don't know where they go, but I thought they were the best. I thought all the forwards were pretty good. Bateman had his moment, still doesn't necessarily just tuck the ball under and bury in, but that's probably not him. And the others all what you expect. Papi was good. Clammer did his job. And Pole still only green, but he will get somewhere eventually. What do you think of it all, Bar?
Well, it seemed to me like it was just whoever was going to make the last error was going to be the team that loses the game, and it ended up being that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
As you said, if the Tigers could have cashed in a little bit earlier than what they did, they should have probably won this game pretty comfortably. Parramatta played one of their poorer games for the year, and we're really very unsound with their defence on the outside edges, which is sort of unlike.
I know it's it's not unlike
Parramatta,
but it is a new combination on that right side with Hayes and Russell, but they were. It felt at any time
they were getting beaten inside and outside. Yeah. Like normally it's just someone rushing out or making a poor decision, but they were just comprehensively getting beaten on both shoulders down that edge. Madison probably got him out of the shit, to be honest. The amount of work he did through the middle of the field and cover up stuff. There was a couple of opportunities where players were going across the field, and just again that last pass that just sort of went to ground or went behind someone or over someone's head. But once Dewey went off, you could really see the game plan shift back to Appy. And obviously, that's just I don't know how it's taken them this long to realise that that's what they need to do. It was quite clear and obvious once Dewey went, even probably 10 minutes before Dewey went off, I think they'd already made the decision that they were going to run pretty much all their offence through Appy. And it made a massive difference. You could see that he was compressing the defensive line. He was having players on his inside, which was worrying the defence, and they were holding, and then it just gave more space on the outside. But Brooks is pretty decent.
He was.
Considering how much he cops week in and week out, but he put in a pretty good effort. And the Tigers, you do have to take your hat off to them. They fought to the last minute, but unfortunately, Charlie Staines drops that drop out over the sideline, and the game could have been completely different. Two tackles, you could be on their 15, 20 metre line attacking, pressing.
They were they would have munched that 40 metres in a heartbeat.
And then they went straight down the other end. Unfortunately, 4 tackles later, and Parramatta score, which was enough for them to win the game.
Which has been the problem all year. Every game they've lost. I think they've lost 3 games by 6 points or whatever it's been, and they've conceded times where they've just been marched down and scored next set. Yeah. This Para pack is funny because they do have those sort of 2 or 3, maybe 4 games a year where they just get owned and don't know how to, but they don't know how to get out of it. They just go, oh, well, shit. Right. It's like and obviously not having Paulie didn't help, but it'll happen at a random game against Canberra somewhere again later where they just don't know how to get out of their half for whatever reason, and this was it.
Yeah, and they had to rely on their outside backs realistically.
Yeah.
And Penasini and Sivo to make some meters, Gutherson chiming in at different points. But Brown was decent. I thought Sivo had one of his better games for a little while. Got a little bit more involved. Still like to see him do a bit more work. But Cartwright was very good again. It's been pretty impressive this year considering how poor he's been there for a number of years now since Penrith. Madison and Moses were the difference.
Yeah.
The 2 players.
And I'll throw Gutho into a basket a little bit there, just his defensive work as usual, and he had involvements in 2 of those tries where he did the usual sweep out and make that extra man for Sivo. So, fair enough. You'd hope to see Para bounce back and get that out of the system next week. If not, better team beats them.
Pretty shaky start to the season. So.
Anyway, what are we doing? Are you giving Moses 3 or?
Yeah, I gave Moses 3, and then I gave Junior Tupu 2. And I had either Madison or Dewey for the 1.
Yeah, actually, we didn't even really mention Dewey because he got injured, but it was the best he's kicked this year. And
he was engaging the line, especially on that right-hand side as well.
They just seemed all of them finally had a bit of a clearer picture of their job, and it probably comes a bit unhappy leading the way there. Be interesting to see what they come up with next time they take the field. I want to mention Charlie Staines too. I'll give it to who else did you say? Dewey. Well, there's no point really giving Dewey a point now. Give it to Madison because Dewey's not going to miss out at the end of the year.
No more points.
Well, there we go. That's that in the books. Again, any other big takeaways before we get into our regular segment?
It's not really. There was apart from a couple of performances that were very underwhelming. Some of the teams you expect better out of.
A lot of them are still one-offs, so I'm sort of treating. Yeah, Brisbane Roosters. If they put 3 in a row like that, you'd question everything. Yeah, but absolutely. For now, I'm treating all 3 of those games as
the Roosters seem to be a good game followed by a ball game. So that concerns me this week.
And it's still and they still do rely on individual brilliance a bit much. Yeah, they rely on Walker just to take control or Teddy to drag them home a lot. We'll see what happens once they get Crichton back and a bit more normality. Brisbane will see again.
Parra's probably played 4 games and 2 decent games.
Yeah,
maybe you'd say 1 good one.
And probably the other one I'll probably mention is the one I've got grave concerns for is Manly, because I can see them now dropping. And
Manly and the Cowboys.
And Turbo's now held together again by plasticine, it seems. He's injected up, and hopefully I'm wrong, but his involvement was almost non-existent at times. So, and like actively wandering around the back there in pain. So, I would.
Still apparently had needles at half time for back spasms.
I've just got a feeling I'm just going to take Manly on now until convinced otherwise out of all of those teams. So, anyway, we've got a Potplant.
I do. Both of my negatives this week come from the Dragon side, to be honest with you. I thought there was a couple of really poor performances out of their players. Ben Murdoch-Masila was probably my one, considering he's had a couple of decent games. The bloke was out there for, 60-odd minutes and had 7 runs of football. It made a handful of tackles, missed 4 of them, made some errors. It's toss up between him and Sloan, realistically, for the Potplant of the league.
Yeah, not the first time Sloane's featured. A couple, I'm going to give Kelma Tuolangi. He'll be one of them, that's for sure. He well and truly deserves that.
I missed him. Yeah.
And Josh Reynolds, I'm not quite sure what he was contributing, but he wasn't on his own there, in fairness. So I can't imagine the experiment with him playing lock off the bench is going to continue too much longer. Got a salute and slap?
Yeah, well, slap goes to the other one I mentioned, Sloan at the back for the Dragons. 4 errors, and they were pretty simple ones. He really needs to close that gap between his best game and his worst game. His worst game is absolutely atrocious, and his best game only comes around once every sort of 2 months. So he's got to get some consistency in his football.
Yeah, I can't imagine a new coach would help that, but we'll find out in the next couple of weeks. I'm going to slap the Parramatta forward pack because they just need the wake-up call this week. Nothing too harsh. I was thinking about giving it to some of the officials in the Brisbane game, but I've softened my stance. Some common sense around, I suppose. Salute. I'll give it to Latrell. I like seeing happy Latrell. I like seeing game-winning Latrell, and I like seeing Latrell do things like that. So it made me pleased, and I'm going to salute him this week. What about yourself?
Cameron Must. He's probably already copped it 2 or 3 times this year where he's just been hands down the best player on the field. At his absolute best, looks at the moment the best player in the game.
Yeah.
I know you got your arguments with the likes of Cleary and throw Nico and Tommy in at his best, but at the moment, he hasn't put in a ball, and when he's at his absolute best, he just does.
It's funny because he's always been that Origin or Grand Final star, Australian star, without ever being the best player in the game, and now it generally feels like he is in that discussion. Because I don't think you could argue Melbourne might not win a game without him, to be honest. But
I think he played 4 games this year, and he's been a standout in pretty much every one of those.
Absolutely. And we'll see what he brings at fullback this week. But we'll talk about all of that when we get to our preview in a sec. That is Footy and Frothies for another week. We analysed that Dragons game 3 times over, which is nice. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can find us on Spotify, of course. You can subscribe there, listen in your car or walking your dog, wherever you may be. If you're listening, you can find us on YouTube. There's been some good responses there. Thanks to everyone that has subscribed recently. Get on board, leave us some feedback, and we will touch on it every week. Also on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. Take care, guys. And we'll be back to preview another good round of footy momentarily. Bye.